Stop scrolling. God says, the burden you've been carrying was never meant for your shoulders. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because today, God wants to set you free. The morning sky above the city looked beautiful to everyone except Ethan. People hurried across the sidewalks carrying coffee cups, backpacks, and dreams. Cars filled the streets with endless noise. Construction workers laughed together before beginning another long day. Businessmen checked their watches. Mothers walked their children toward school. Life seemed to be moving for everyone, except him. He sat quietly on an old wooden bench in a city park, his shoulders slumped beneath a worn-out hoodie. His shoes were torn. His backpack held everything he still owned. A few dollars, a bottle of water, a faded photograph of his mother, and a Bible that had not been opened in months. Ethan wasn't always homeless. Just 2 years earlier, he had believed life was finally beginning. He had graduated with hope in his heart. He dreamed about finding a good job, renting an apartment, helping his mother pay her bills, and someday building a family of his own. But life didn't unfold the way he imagined. Interview after interview ended with rejection. "I'm sorry, we've chosen another candidate. We'll keep your resume on file. You don't have enough experience." The words became painfully familiar. Weeks became months. Months became a year. His savings disappeared. Bills piled higher than he could pay. The apartment was gone. His mother became sick in another state, and before Ethan could earn enough money to visit her, she passed away. He never got to say goodbye. That regret became a weight he carried every single day. After that, his prayers slowly became quieter. Not because he stopped believing in God, but because he wondered if God still believed in him. Every morning he searched for work. Every evening he returned to another bench. Every night he stared into the stars, asking questions that never seemed to receive an answer. "Jesus, are you still here?" Silence. At least that's what it felt like. One afternoon, the rain began unexpectedly. People rushed for shelter. Ethan remained sitting. He didn't have anywhere to go. The rain soaked his clothes. Still he stayed. Finally he whispered, "If you're real, if you still see me, please help me." Nothing dramatic happened. No thunder, no bright light, no voice from heaven. Only the gentle sound of rain falling across the empty park. A woman walking her dog noticed him. She paused. "You okay?" He forced a smile. "I'll be all right." She nodded politely and continued walking. Another man passed without looking at him. 2 teenagers laughed as they hurried by. Several people acted as though the lonely young man on the bench didn't even exist. Invisible. That's how Ethan felt. Not only to people, but perhaps even to heaven. That evening, hunger twisted inside his stomach. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The small food pantry nearby had already closed. His last few dollars wouldn't buy much. He quietly lowered his head. "Jesus, I'm tired." The wind gently moved through the trees. Leaves danced across the sidewalk. Something inside him remembered a verse his mother often quoted. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." He couldn't even remember where it was written, but he remembered her smile. She always smiled when she spoke about Jesus, even during chemotherapy, even during pain, even while worrying about bills. She would say, "Ethan, never confuse God's silence with his absence." At the time, he believed her. Now, he wasn't so sure. The next morning he woke before sunrise. The park was almost empty. His back ached from sleeping on wood. His stomach hurt from hunger. His heart hurt even more. He walked toward another employment center, hoping today might finally be different. The receptionist smiled kindly. "I'm sorry, no openings today." Another rejection, another walk back through crowded streets, another reminder that everyone else seemed to belong somewhere. Late that afternoon, Ethan returned to the same bench, almost as if the bench had become his address. He watched pigeons gather around children, throwing bread. He quietly smiled. At least someone was eating. As the sun slowly lowered behind the buildings, an elderly man approached. He wore simple clothes. Nothing expensive, nothing that attracted attention. He carried no briefcase, no phone, only calmness. Without asking permission, he sat beside Ethan. Neither of them spoke for nearly a minute. The old man looked toward the sky. Beautiful evening. Ethan shrugged. I guess. You don't sound convinced. I stopped noticing beautiful things. The old man nodded slowly. Pain has a way of stealing our eyesight. That sentence caught Ethan's attention. It felt different. The stranger turned toward him. You've been carrying something much heavier than that backpack. Ethan looked surprised. You don't even know me. No, but I recognize tired souls. For reasons Ethan couldn't explain, he began talking about losing his job, about his mother, about sleeping outside, about unanswered prayers, about wondering whether Jesus had forgotten him. When he finished, he expected another empty encouragement. Instead, the old man simply asked, Who told you that God only works through comfortable seasons? Ethan frowned. I don't know. When gold is refined, is it placed somewhere comfortable? No. When seeds become trees, do they stay inside the package forever? No. When muscles become stronger, do they avoid resistance? Again, no. The old man smiled. So why do you believe your soul should grow without hardship? Ethan stared at the ground. He had never thought about it that way. The stranger continued gently. Sometimes heaven is doing its deepest work when earth appears completely silent. A tear rolled down Ethan's cheek. I've prayed every day. I know. I've begged Jesus to answer. I know. I've waited. I know. Ethan suddenly looked up. How do you know? The old man's eyes seemed filled with unusual kindness. The shepherd always knows where his sheep are. A strange peace settled over the bench. Not because Ethan understood everything, but because, for the first time in many months, he felt seen. The old man stood. I have somewhere to be. Ethan quickly asked, Will I ever see you again? The stranger smiled. If your heart keeps searching, he paused, you'll recognize me. Before Ethan could ask another question, the old man slowly walked away. Not in a hurry, not looking back. Ethan watched until he disappeared around the corner. Something inside him whispered, Open your Bible. He hesitated. Finally, he pulled the dusty Bible from his backpack. It opened almost by itself. His eyes landed on words that seemed written just for him. Words about God never abandoning those who trust him. Words about hope. Words about strength. Words about tomorrow. Tears fell onto the pages, for the first time in months. They weren't tears of despair. They were tears of hope. As darkness covered the city, Ethan looked toward heaven. Not with every answer. Not with a job. Not with a home. But with something he thought he had lost forever. Faith. Little did he know. This quiet evening on an ordinary park bench was only the beginning, because by sunrise a miracle would begin unfolding in a way no one could have imagined. To be continued. The first light of morning slowly spilled across the city. People hurried into another ordinary day. Coffee shops unlocked their doors. Buses filled with commuters. The sound of traffic echoed through the streets. For everyone else, it was just another Tuesday. For Ethan, it would become the day he would remember for the rest of his life. He opened his eyes on the same wooden bench. His situation hadn't changed. His backpack was still beside him. His clothes were still worn. His pockets were still nearly empty. Yet something inside him was different. The hopelessness that had lived in his heart for so long no longer felt as heavy. The mysterious old man's words echoed through his mind. The shepherd always knows where his sheep are. Ethan quietly folded his hands. For the first time in months, he didn't begin his prayer by asking for money, or a job, or a miracle. Instead, he whispered, Jesus, I don't understand what you're doing, but today, I'll trust you anyway. It was the simplest prayer he had prayed in years, and somehow, it brought the deepest peace. After leaving the park, Ethan walked toward another employment office. To be honest, he expected another rejection. He had almost become accustomed to hearing the word no. But as he entered the building, the receptionist looked up with a warm smile. You came at the perfect time. Ethan looked confused. I did. She nodded. A local business owner called this morning. One of his employees quit unexpectedly. He needs someone today. Ethan almost laughed. Are you serious? I am. She handed him an address. It's only a few blocks away. Ethan thanked her and hurried through the streets. His heart pounded, not because he believed the job was guaranteed, but because, for the first time in a long while, a door had opened. The business was small, nothing fancy, an old neighborhood furniture workshop. The owner, Mr. Carter, looked at Ethan for a long moment. You've worked with your hands before? A little. You willing to learn? Absolutely, Mr. Carter smiled. That's more valuable than experience. Ethan blinked. You're hiring me? I'm giving you a chance. Those words nearly brought tears to Ethan's eyes, because sometimes a chance is all a person needs. Weeks passed. Ethan worked harder than anyone else. He arrived early, stayed late, learned quickly. He repaired broken chairs, built tables, delivered furniture, swept the floors after everyone else had gone home. Not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because he had learned something sitting on that park bench. Faith isn't waiting for miracles while doing nothing. Faith is walking faithfully when miracles haven't appeared yet. One afternoon, Mr. Carter called Ethan into his office. I've been watching you. Ethan became nervous. I'm sorry if I've done something wrong. Mr. Carter laughed. You've done everything right. He slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was enough money for a security deposit on a small apartment. Ethan stared in disbelief. I can't accept this. Yes, you can. But why? Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair. Years ago, I was homeless too. Ethan froze. I know what it's like to feel invisible. Then Mr. Carter quietly added, someone believed in me when nobody else would. Now, it was his turn to believe in someone else. A month later, Ethan moved into the smallest apartment he had ever seen. To most people, it wasn't impressive. Old carpet, tiny kitchen, second-hand furniture. But that first night, he stood in the middle of the room with tears running down his face. Because after sleeping on benches for months, a simple roof felt like a palace. He knelt beside his bed. Jesus, thank you. Not because you gave me everything I wanted, but because you never left me when I thought you had. Life slowly became stable. Bills were paid. Food filled the refrigerator. His clothes became cleaner. His smile became genuine again. But the greatest miracle wasn't his paycheck. It was his heart. Every Sunday, Ethan volunteered at a local outreach ministry. He served meals, distributed blankets, prayed with strangers, listened to stories that sounded painfully familiar. Whenever someone apologized for asking for help, Ethan smiled. You don't need to apologize. I've sat where you're sitting. One rainy evening, after serving dinner at the shelter, Ethan walked through the same city park. Almost without thinking, he stopped beside the old wooden bench, the very place where everything had changed. He gently touched the weathered wood. It looked exactly the same, but he wasn't the same man anymore. As he stood there, he noticed someone sitting at the other end of the bench. A young man, dirty clothes, empty eyes, a backpack resting beside him, almost like looking into his own past. The young man quietly whispered, I don't think Jesus sees me anymore. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment. Those were almost the exact words he had once spoken. He sat beside him. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan smiled gently. Beautiful evening. The young man shrugged. I guess. Ethan couldn't help but smile. The conversation sounded strangely familiar. You've been carrying something much heavier than that backpack. The young man slowly looked up. Tears filled his eyes. How did you know? Ethan looked toward the sky. Because someone once said those exact words to me. The two men talked for hours. Ethan shared his story, not as someone who had figured life out, but as someone who had discovered that Jesus never abandons those who feel forgotten. When they finished praying together, the young man asked, Do you think Jesus could still use someone like me? Ethan answered without hesitation. He specializes in people exactly like us. That night, walking home beneath the stars, Ethan suddenly remembered something. The old man. He had never seen him again. Not once. He asked Mr. Carter. He asked people who visited the park. He asked workers nearby. No one remembered an elderly man matching that description. It was as though he had appeared only for Ethan. As Ethan reached his apartment, he opened his Bible once more. A small piece of folded paper slipped onto the floor. He was certain it hadn't been there before. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. Only one sentence was written. I was with you on the bench, and I will be with you wherever you go. No signature, no explanation, only peace. Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time, he truly understood. Jesus had never been absent during the darkest days. He had been quietly walking beside him, even when Ethan couldn't recognize him. If you're watching this today and feel forgotten, if you're carrying burdens no one else can see, if you're sitting on your own bench wondering whether heaven has gone silent, remember Ethan's story. The greatest miracles often begin before we can see them. The longest nights are not proof that God has left. Sometimes, they are simply the place where faith learns to breathe again. Jesus still sees the lonely. He still hears whispered prayers. He still opens doors no one else can open. And he is still writing stories that seem impossible until the day they become someone's testimony. Maybe, today, he's already writing yours.